about using your smart interactive display with your students to just quickly create and share some student-centered learning opportunities. And we're going to share some additional resources with you as well, so some takeaways. So if you are at your panel today, feel free to click along with me and create as I go. If you are not at your panel, not a worry. We'll be linking this file to the sheet so that you can go ahead and refer back to it after today. All right, so we'll take a moment just to introduce ourselves. I'm Sarah Stork, Professional Development Specialist with SMART. You're welcome to reach out with any questions or connect with me. And then we also have Amy Barnes with us. We'd like to say hi to the group, Amy.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. I'm Amy Barnes. I'm the Smart Education Solutions Consultant, and I live in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Awesome. All right. So we are super excited. We have a really focused agenda here for you today. And what we are going to be looking at is just quickly adding some interactive pages to your whiteboard and using that board with students, again, for that student-centered learning. We are going to be connecting student devices to the board as well. So we're going to talk about how you can use your board with students at the board, interacting with some learning opportunities, but you can also connect your student devices to the board as well. And we're going to walk through that today. Finally, we're going to talk about how you can provide students with feedback as they are learning, again, either at the board or through their devices. So let's kind of dive on in. I'm going to head to the home screen of my board, and what I am going to do is go ahead and start a new whiteboard. And like I said, if you are at your panel right now, I would encourage you to walk up to your board and go ahead and click along with us. So I am going to go ahead and just tap on the whiteboard and open up a fresh new whiteboard here. So the whiteboard, it has that white background with the green pen. Go ahead and tap and open up your whiteboard. Well, the first thing I want to do is provide a space for my students to collect all of their thinking and all of their wonderful work here. So I'm going to start by thinking about using the board as a center or a station for my students. When I go to the bottom of the page, I see I have the different page options. Hopefully you've had a chance to kind of explore these if you've had your board for a little bit. But I'm going to choose the lined paper. So now I'm going to create this structure for my students and have this background for my students for them, again, to add their thinking to the board. We really want students to drive their learning here on this center that we're going to create. Well, I'm going to start by creating a math station for my students. So I have my lined paper here for my students to gather all of their thoughts. And now I'm going to go ahead and open up my interactive widgets. And I'm going to add a piece of interaction to this page for my students. So my widgets are on the left-hand side. So if you are tapping along with me, you can find those little squares on the left-hand side. If you tap there, you're going to see all the different widget options that you have. You could add something like interactive dice, or if you are building a math station, adding a protractor or a ruler to the page for students to really have their hands on their learning. What I'm going to do is add a spinner to the page, and I'm going to customize it so I can create this station for my students. I'm going to tap on that spinner, and I'm just going to add it right to the page. I can just tap right on outside. Maybe I want to make it a little smaller. Maybe I want to move it around. Just notice I'm tapping just right on the outside of that spinner to be able to move it around. When I tap on the spinner, it's interactive for students, so they can just tap on that spinner and use it during their learning. I want to customize this a little bit, so I am going to tap on just right outside that spinner, and I'm going to click on, I have a little blue circle there with a white V. If I tap there, I can go ahead and use the settings of the spinner. I want to customize this for my lesson's objective and for what my students are working on right now. So I'm going to go ahead and tap on settings. I can create a custom spinner, again, that I can use with my students. So I'm just going to move that a little bit. And if I tap right on outside, then I'm going to tap to add text. Maybe I'm going to add another section to this spinner. Maybe I want to add some more options. I'm going to put some numbers in here for students. So what I am thinking I'm going to have them do is spin a number and then create some equations to go with this number, or maybe even add their own story problems to the page as we're learning. So I'm going to go ahead and just add some numbers in here, maybe 100, 50, 25. There we go. Adding some of these for students. All right. So as we're doing that, Amy, any questions in the chat or any other ideas on how we can use this interactive spinner with students?
We don't have any questions in the chat, but I do have teachers who use the spinner to choose, maybe if they're choosing students to come to the board or they want students to take turns doing things, they put the student names on there, and then they let the spinner choose which student comes to the board or does whatever the activity is.
Well, that's a great idea, right? Giving students that ownership, right? Of being able to spin and have a turn or come lead instruction there. I love that. I also have teachers who might use the spinner to add some brain break options, or maybe even I want to put some question stems in the spinner as well. So if students come up to the board and gather their thoughts, maybe they're either writing questions or they're answering questions. Maybe it's parts of a story as well. So thinking about some of our literacy applications. So awesome. Thanks, Amy, for those great ideas. If anyone else has some ideas on ways to use the spinner in the chat, we'd love to hear that from you. So here we go. I have my spinner all created. I'm going to go ahead and just spin. I landed on the number 25. Now what I would ask students to do is come up to the board, grab a pen, and like I said, maybe we're going to write some equations to go with the number 25 here. And then this way students can really drive how they're interacting with these numbers. You know, if they're ready to start working on some multiplication or division or multi-step problems, or maybe I want them to write a story problem then to go with their equation. So we can really start with this fun interactive widget and then have students take their learning from manipulative to this page. I'm going to start again thinking in that scenario of I want students in small groups coming up to the board, and I'm using my board as a station. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the plus sign on the left, and I'm going to find where it says manipulatives. That's that green box right there. If you've been exploring the manipulatives on your board, we'd love to hear that in the chat too on how you're using these with your students. What I'm going to do is use, let's use this math expressions one. So I'm just going to go ahead and add that. It adds it as another page to my whiteboard. Now I have 2 pages that my students can come up and use during our small group time or our station time. All right, so the next thing I want to do here, let me grab some numbers for students. So maybe I want them working on the number 50 here. And what I'd love for them to do is make equations that are greater than, less than, and equal to 50. So first, I'm just going to start by grabbing those numbers. And then I can add my symbols here. So greater than, less than, and maybe equal to. And again, I can just come on over here, grab these numbers very quickly for students because these are all infinitely cloned, and we can just really easily have this, this center or station built for students. There we go. We just add that right there. Awesome. Okay, so let's all set up. Now, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to lock these numbers down because as you see, they're still kind of moving around so we can interact with all these numbers. But before I have students come up to the board, I want these symbols and numbers just locked right on down to the page. So under my pen, I have that little dashed box. So if you're at your board right now, I would encourage you to look at the tools on the left-hand side. And like I said, underneath that pen, you have that little dashed box. And what you can do with this tool is grab multiple objects. I'm going to grab multiple objects so I can lock them down. All right, I'm just going to go ahead, grab these, highlight everything, and then lock it down right there. So this is an example of one way, like just very easily, we tapped on that plus sign and we found a manipulative that we could use with our students. All right, Amy, any questions or any other thoughts on how we could use some of these math manipulatives with students?
We do not have any questions in the chat right now, I mean, the one thing I would say about the math manipulatives that are important to the teachers I work with are that students get to come up and really be hands-on. And we have, those available also in our software. And so they can create it in the software or create it on the board. But I think the most important part is just they can move it around and that they can come to the board and be hands-on.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Amy, is that we really want students to be active in their learning. We want them to have all of those experiences, to be able to come to the board, work with a small group, and then to create their equations that are going to go with the board. Well, the other thing we can do is we can actually connect students' devices right to this board. So we're thinking about using this in two ways, right? We built this page and we built the previous page to have students come up to the board, interact with the content at the interactive display. But what we can also do is actually have students' Chromebooks just connected directly to this board. So I think we should give this a try. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pop up some directions for you. So to find your directions on your board on how your students will connect. So the first thing I did do is I actually did sign into my board. I'm signed into my board, so my class ID is going to be the same as when I go into Lumio. My file is also saving to Lumio as well. If you're not signed into your board, not a big deal. Your students will be able to connect, but I would get signed in, and that way you can do all the things that I'm about to show right now. So like I said, I'm signed into my board and I'm going to tap on that little person with a number. And this gives my students these directions to go to hellosmart.com and join as a guest. I would have my students sign in, but if you're joining us today, I would just encourage you just to go ahead and sign in as a guest. And then my class ID is 12770. So if anyone would like to join us right now, we're running this live session right now for you to join on in. Awesome. I'm already getting some people connected. So you are more than welcome right now to connect to our live session. So now you will be able to see this math manipulative right on your screen. So again, you're welcome to connect to hellosmart.com. You can just join as a guest for our purposes today. And then my class ID is 12770. All right. I'm sure Amy's popping that information into the chat for us as well. Now, yep, awesome. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and start sharing this lesson. So I am going to tap on the button up here that says start sharing. So now this lesson is going to be pushed out to my students' devices. So now as a student, you will be able to see this math manipulative on your screen. I'm going to tuck these directions away just for right now, because what I really want to do next is turn this page over to my students. So you can see at the bottom of my screen, I have two options. Each student can get their own copy as an individual handout, or I could have students working in small groups. We're going to experience a small group activity in just a few minutes, but let's use this one as a handout. So if I tap on handout, now each student will get their own copy. And what's really helpful about this is as soon as I click on student progress, I can very easily pull up on the board here a teacher copy of the handout. So maybe I do have students working at the board, or I'm modeling for students how to interact with this page. I'm going to pull up my teacher copy of this right here. There we go. Okay. But I can also pop into my students' work. So I'm just going to head on in and maybe I'm just going to tap and take a look and see how students are completing this work here. All right, so it's going to pull right on up there on the screen and they can start working right there on that handout. And then students can start to explain how they solved the equations, how they interacted. They can come up and teach the class because their work is easily shown up on the smartboard just by going ahead and sharing this lesson with students and then using that handout option. Now, each student can demonstrate their learning and then, like I said, come on up to the board and share their learning with others. All right, so I think it's time we're going to take a look at some more examples here and look at some more English language arts examples. But Amy, any questions or anything you'd like to add there?
My work is I'm finished, but I didn't do a very good job. I just want you to know ahead of time. When you open my paper, it's not going to be great. But no, we do not have any questions.
Well, we can certainly pop that up here. Great example, right, of having students interact with the content. So let's see.
Yep.
Thanks, Amy.
It's not my finest activity, but
right. I will point out that Amy pressed her done button. So I have a little green check mark on her work, which is really giving me that nice indication of, oh, Amy's ready to share her work. Oh, looks like we're going to keep working there. All right. So now, like I said, I'm going to head on back to my home screen here, and let's open up a new whiteboard file and keep exploring how we can create some of the student-centered learning. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open up my whiteboard again. I have a fresh whiteboard, and I can still be sharing this lesson with my students. Again, if you're connected to my lesson, I'm just going to tap on Start Sharing, and now this is going to push out again to your devices. Now, again, think about those different scenarios. I can have students working at the board in a center or a station, or I can have you working on your devices in a center or a station, and I've just pushed that whiteboard right on out to you. I think this time, let's look at some vocabulary. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that plus sign on the left-hand side, and I'm going to grab one of the graphic organizers. You have a lot of different options here when it comes to just adding some graphic organizers. And again, I could have started in Lumio and set up my lesson there, but I just wanted to walk up to my board, sign in, and just get started creating some of these centers and stations for students. So I am going to tap on my brainstorming web. Now, this is one of my favorite graphic organizers. To me, the possibilities are fairly endless. I'm thinking I could use this to have students brainstorm, activate prior knowledge, or maybe reflect on their learning for the day just by using this brainstorming graphic organizer. Students at the board or from their devices, they can add words, they can add pictures, and this can just really be a space for them to drive their learning. So what I do want to do is I'm going to add a word to the page. And, if we're talking about learning about synonyms or just really leveling up our vocabulary here, we're going to start with a word, and then I really want to grow from there and really expand our vocabulary today. So I tapped on the pen on the left side, and I could simply start writing on the board. I am going to go with the text pen, actually. That's the little pen with the capital A and the lowercase a. So if you're tapping along on your board, you're welcome to find that pen. I'm going to choose a color, and then I'm just going to write a word in the middle here. Okay, so let's start with the word happy. Well, I'm thinking that if we are using some of this vocabulary for our writing that we're doing today, or if we're trying to expand and grow our vocabulary, that there are so many other words that we could use than the word happy. So let's work on that today. Let's expand our vocabulary. All right, so I'm going to lock this down. I just tapped on that word happy, and I'm going to go ahead and glue that down onto the page right there. And then again, thinking about I could have students at the board working, I could be making notes up here. You can see if you are connected to my lesson that you can see everything we're doing at the board. So think again about having students come to the board and lead instruction, show what they know, teach the class. You could have students come on up to the board and add all of their thoughts that will get pushed out to their friends' devices if they've connected through Hello Smart. But let's think about this more about having students connect from their devices and add their thinking to the page. So again, I'm going to tap on that little person over here. And just as a reminder, if you'd like to see what this looks like, you can go to hellosmart.com and join in as a student. My class ID is 12770. I'm going to tuck this little panel away right now. And at the bottom, again, we talked about this earlier. I had that individual handout option, but I could also turn this into a collaborative workspace. So I am going to go ahead and tap on that collaborative workspace opportunity. All right. Now, simply just to kind of review what we did here to make this center, we tapped on that plus sign. We selected a graphic organizer. We added a word. I could have added some images. We'll get into the images here in a few minutes. And then I'm just going to go ahead and convert that right into that collaborative workspace. So we're getting all converted here. I'm going to have an option. I'm going to get an option to turn this page into a small group activity. So if I'm thinking about grouping in intentional small groups in my classroom, I could have students work together in small groups on this collaborative workspace. I can also have students work as a whole group on this collaborative workspace. And that is going to be, I think probably that's the option that I'm going to go with. Let me go ahead and just pop out of this for just 1 second and come right on back here. Let's see if we can get that all converted into that collaborative workspace. So again, just in this one page, I'm going to be able to have students connect then from their devices. All right, looks like we're getting all connected here. All right, let me try that one more time. All right, and then again, everything that I'm doing here today, I'm saving it to my Lumio library. So everything that you're doing today, I can share out with students and I can share out with you later. All right, so here's my brainstorming web. I use that collaborative workspace opportunity. And now what I'm going to do is just tap to set up my workspace. And again, just like I said before, I have 2 options. Let me go ahead and make sure I'm sharing this whiteboard. Good, I am. All right. I have the 2 options. I could put you into small groups or I could have us all work together. Let's go ahead and just all work on one team. All right. So there's that word that we started with and the word happy. Well, as a teacher, I can be working in real time with students, or I could have students at the board, or students can be, again, contributing from their devices. So when students start adding content to the board, it will start popping up for us. As a teacher, I can be adding some content as we go too, and we can just be working in real time together on the board. I really want to be giving my students that feedback in real time so we can be talking and discussing about these words. And then, like I said, they can be contributing as we go. So let me add a few more words here, maybe cheerful. All right. Maybe I want to add some images to this board. I can do that as well. Maybe instead of just pictures to go or just words to go with the word happy, I want students to look for pictures. So we would just tap on that little plus sign and I can do a quick search. We'll use that in our next example as well. All right, Amy, any questions about that collaborative space or any other uses that are kind of bubbling up for us to use this collaborative space?
We do not have any questions. I think you need to share it. I don't see it on my device.
Okay. Let me stop and start again. There we go. All right. Let's see if we can get that pulled up. Let me know.
Okay.
All right.
Looks good. This is the brainstorming web is one of my favorite ones. I like to use it for if we're talking about a story to kind of do the theme and then do supporting facts. And so brainstorming web, you can just about do anything with it. And kids love to come up and write in the ovals very much. So it's a cool one. My kids love it. My kids pull it up all the time when they're not in school.
Oh, I love that. That's so fun. Yeah, and I agree. You know, every opportunity that students have to come up and use the board, teach each other, really demonstrate what they know up on the board. It's always, engaging for them. But I love how I could have students from their devices contribute as well, so they can really drive where we go with this lesson. So I'm thinking that, if I had students add some other words to the board and we were really, brainstorming here, coming up with those different thoughts, what if we had a word, maybe we added some words here that we really need to dive into a little bit more. Maybe someone added the word elated. All right. And then as a class, we're thinking, maybe that's a word I'm not as familiar with, or I don't quite understand that word well. Well, let's go ahead. Maybe I'll circle that. Okay, well, this is a word that we should dive into and take a closer look at. So I'm going to go ahead and just go right back into that plus sign right now. And if I dive back into that plus sign, I see on inside of my graphic organizers, I'm going to go ahead and select another one. There are many different options here. If you haven't had a chance to explore the graphic organizers inside of your whiteboard, you have things like Venn diagrams or tree charts, thinking frames. Again, I can think of just so many different ways for students to use some of these graphic organizers, whether each student has their own copy or whether they're working in small groups or whole groups together. But at the top here, I see that I have a Frayer model. So I am going to go ahead and grab that Frayer model. I think this is going to be a great graphic organizer to use to really dive into this word even more. So I will grab my text pen here again. I like using this text pen, make it nice and clear for my students. So we're going to go ahead and write that word elated up on the board and turn that into that text here. Let's just do that just a second. Maybe I can grab that one more time. Oh, yep. There we go. All right, we're going to go ahead and add that word elated. And now again, I can lock that word to the page. Maybe I want to make it even larger. And I can lock that down. Now it's glued to the page. And then we can use this Frayer model to add some more words, add some pictures to go along with it, and to really dive into this word. Now, I am going to go ahead and if I tap on my little person over here, we can again use this as that collaborative space. So I'm going to go ahead and tap on collaborative workspace. That's going to go ahead and we'll set it up. And this time, maybe I want this to be a small group space. So if I do have students in the class, maybe I'd want to put us into 2 or 3 groups. Let's go ahead and put you into 2 groups there. It's going to assign you a team. If I felt like I wanted to move students around, maybe I'll put Julie over here in team 1 or leave her in team 2. Or I could have students come up to the board, move their names around into their small groups, and then they could get started on this page. So I'm really thinking about those intentional small group opportunities for students to work together. And during that time, students are going to be able to choose which group they work in, or maybe as a teacher, I'm going to select those groups based on the objective of our time together. But then students can then work together in those small groups to add to this graphic organizer. So I'll go ahead and start this workspace and that'll get it all set up for you. Again, up on the board, I can interact with students as they are contributing from their devices. So if I hop into Amy's workspace here in her small group, I can see what she's adding to the page. Maybe we are going to add a sentence or maybe a definition, or maybe I'm going to ask her a question right here. All right. So maybe I'm going to ask, all right, what does elated mean? All right, now I've asked her a question. She can go ahead and find that definition and add it right to the board. We can have that two-way conversation going here, and I can give her that feedback in real time. Awesome. She was able to add text to her page right there. She's able to add a picture to go with it right there, and everything that I'm doing too is going to show up on her device. As a teacher, if I wanted to add, some more pictures to this page, again, there's that little mountain with a plus sign. So that option right there, you can do a search and you can find some images to connect to this word. So maybe I would search for the word elated, or if I search for happy, I can just go ahead, do that search real quick. Maybe we're going to find some pictures to go along with it. Awesome. Oh, there's some penguins there. Maybe that's some happy feet. So there we go. I'm going to go ahead and move that around and just add it right to the board. That image search that students can do here at the board to add, or they might be doing that same image search from their devices and adding to the workspace. That's a safe search. So my students can just hop on in to their workspace, do that quick image search, add some images to the board, and just really add those visuals to unpack this vocabulary word that we're focusing on right now. All right, love that. I'm gonna hop back and see if we were able to add anything to our other space here. If we're still working, looks like we're still working. All right, but think about just how easy that is to have students work from their devices, add to the board, and then we can come do a virtual gallery walk up at the board. So I could, again, have that small group come to the board, show their work, and explain their thinking, teach the class, and really unpack what we're learning today. Whether it's a new topic, we're reviewing a topic that we've been working on, or we're diving a little deeper into an objective of our lesson. All right, Amy, any questions or anything to add before we keep plugging along here?
I think we're good to go.
Okay, awesome. All right, so let's keep exploring this topic here, and we're going to add another manipulative to our page. All right, so again, in that plus sign on the left-hand side, maybe you're noticing a theme here. You know, as you're exploring your whiteboard, that plus sign really unpacks a lot for you. Again, we have those graphic organizers, just as a review there, but now I'm going to hop into some of the manipulatives again. We saw these earlier and we grabbed that math example, but just as a review, you have a digital calendar here. You can add a coins manipulative to the board, maybe fraction tiles. There is a math expressions that has the interactive dice there as well. And then sorting shapes are on here too. Well, because this lesson, was the vocabulary lesson, so I am going to go ahead and grab the making words manipulative here. So I'm thinking about using this one in quite a few different ways. I think some of my students, maybe some younger students, you might be practicing your phonics skills using the making words activity. Maybe you're having students create sentences up here. I'm thinking for older students, I might have them use this activity to create a word that connects with what did we learn about today. I could use this as a reflection tool for my students. Add a word that connects from what we learned about today, or to summarize, make 3 words that summarize what we learned about today. I could also have students use this one. Maybe we're going to make a crossword puzzle up here, and they get to just really be creative. Again, up at the board, or we could use that collaborative space. What I'm going to do is make a word here. Let's make the word glad. Right, so you notice I'm just dragging and dropping. After I add that manipulative to the page, now I'm just dragging and dropping those words and those letter tiles right up on the page here. Over on the left-hand side, I know I want to find that selection tool, so that's right underneath my pens. So right here is that selection tool, okay? I'm going to drag and select all those letters, tap, and maybe before I do that, I'm going to just one more time. Yeah, I'm going to move that over right over here. And now I'm going to go ahead and lock that down. So now I have this word here, and I would really like for my students to come up with maybe an acrostic poem to go with the word glad, and to really demonstrate their understanding of this word. And maybe I want them to use what are some of those other vocabulary words that we really started exploring today. So just like I've been doing before, I will make sure my students are connected if I want them to be connected to this board. Again, they've gone to Hello Smart to connect. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn this into an individual handout activity. So each student is going to have that option to add text, and then maybe they could even find some images to add to the board as well. I'll go ahead and tap on student progress. This is going to allow students to have their own copy of this page. Okay, so now we've kind of thought about this in 3 ways to have this flexible learning and again, to have my students really drive their learning. So in a few different ways, I could have students working on these pages just right on the board. That could be my center for the day or my station. Or maybe I've pushed this lesson out to my students' devices so that they can then interact with either that handout or with a small group as a workspace. Because we've been working on a few different pages and we're really building upon what we learned today. We started with that brainstorming web, then we went in and we used the Freyer model, and now finally we're creating this poem using the making words activity. What I want to do is give my students the flexibility to go between this whole file. So I am going to go ahead and click on that little person on the left-hand side, and I'm going to toggle this over to student pacing. What that is going to allow my students to do is go back to page 1 or page 2 or continue on. So now they have the flexibility to go through the entire file at their own pace. Again, I want students to really be driving this instruction and drive this lesson. So I want them to have that opportunity to go back, maybe review some of the words that we put into the word web. Maybe they're going to use that in this task. Or maybe I've put in a video in this lesson for my students to watch, or some additional information for them to review and to use in this task. So again, what I did is up on the little person, I just toggled this over to student pacing. And now students can go from page to page. When I'm ready to bring everybody back together, I simply tap on teacher pacing, and then I can drive that learning again. Or maybe we put it over on teacher pacing, and then students can come up to the board and teach the class. So I've left that on student pacing for just a moment. We know, again, we have a teacher handout here in the bottom right-hand corner. I can model for my students how to interact with the page and maybe give them an example of a poem, or maybe I have students working at the board. If I toggle back, I have that little, what I'm doing is I'm tapping on a little arrow in the upper left-hand corner to be heading on back there. And now if I pop into Amy's work, I can see what she's added to the page. Awesome. She has started to add some words and pictures. And as soon as I go in and add, maybe I'm going to add a smiley face there. Great job, a star. And she can see that right on her handout. So again, this is how I'm going to give students that direct feedback while they're learning, because I can be hopping in and out of all of their work. And I can be adding, notes or questions, or maybe some supports or some challenge and extension tasks to students' page. Maybe I'm going to add a question in there for them to be really thinking about, to continue to level up their thinking. So I can really meet my students where they are as we're learning. I can use this individual option, or I can use the workspace option. All right. So Amy, how are we doing there? Any questions?
We're good. We don't have any questions right now.
All right, wonderful. Thanks. So I'm thinking about pulling this lesson all together for my students. And we're going to talk about one more item that I might add to my board. And then we'll kind of talk about where is this lesson saving and how can I access this later, because I know that's certainly important. So to pull this all together for my students, I have in the bottom left-hand corner, I have some arrows, and that's how I can navigate between the pages. Remember, I have this set to that student pacing. So students could be on page 5 while I go back to page 4 and review and talk or check work. If I tap on that little number, I can see all the pages in this file. So this is how I could go between the pages and access different pages in my whiteboard file here. But, I'm going to head back into that plus sign. So let me pull us back down on page 5 here. I'm going to go back into that plus sign on the left-hand side, because what I really want to do is add a reflection task for my students. So I'm going to tap on that plus sign on the left-hand side, and up at the top, if I needed to add a blank whiteboard page, that's where that would be, right there at the top. And next to it, I have a shout it out activity. So I'm going to go ahead and add that shout it out activity. Okay. And then I'm going to start this for the class. So when I start this process for the class. It will pull all my students into the Shout It Out. And this is going to be a great opportunity to ask my students, what is one thing that you learned today? What's one question that you still have? Or maybe I would ask students to summarize what we learned about today. And once they're connected to my whiteboard, they're going to be able to use Shout It Out and add those thoughts to the board. Their reflections are going to pop right on up on my smart board here for the whole class to see. So Shout It Out can be just a great way for students to reflect on their lessons. Maybe I'm going to have students brainstorming maybe I'll have students brainstorming different ideas. Shout It Out can be a great way to brainstorm as well. So responses look a little small there probably. So if I go ahead and tap right here, I can see, oh, great. Well, today we're learning how to share your board activities to student devices and really incorporate those student devices. So many great ways to use Shout It Out to have students join in on that learning and to really get students' voice heard. Again, I want students driving that instruction. So I want to hear from them, and I want them to be reflecting, to be asking questions, brainstorming, and adding their thoughts. Amy, any other ways you might use Shout It Out with students?
I think a good way to use Shout It Out from some teachers that I've heard, they use it for social emotional activities. Maybe on a Monday morning, say to their students, maybe use an image. How was your weekend? Or how are you feeling this morning? Just to kind of gauge the class and get a handle on how the kids are feeling after the weekend or anytime, really.
Well, exactly, right? Maybe it's a quick check-in when they come back in from another class period. Maybe as they're changing classes or, I have a lot of teachers that I work with. They might use this as their bell ringer or do now activity. It's also a great exit ticket. And then Amy brought up a good point of maybe I want to use this during a morning meeting or to have my students really practice some of those social emotional learning skills. So an option that I have with Shout It Out is I can tap on the little gear and I can go ahead and make this an anonymous task. So if I tap on display names and I turn that off, now it's simply an icon over here. And my students can feel free to share without having their name displayed up on the board. As a teacher, I can go back and turn on the names or see who added what to the board. But I know I've worked with school counselors, and this has really been a helpful tool for them. Sometimes I know students are hesitant to share, and having that anonymous option can really help them feel more comfortable to share with the group. All right. So Amy, let me know if any questions are popping in before we kind of, wind down and talk about some other ideas and where is this lesson? I think we should probably answer that question.
Yes, ma'am. Nope, we're good with questions, so we're ready to move on.
All right, sounds good. So I am going to go back to my home screen here for just a moment. All right. Now, where is my lesson? How do I continue to provide my students with feedback? And how do I continue to use this lesson with my students? Well, like I said, the first thing I did was I signed into my board. So signing into your board is up in the upper left-hand corner. You have, it'll be a little white smiley face. If you tap there, you can sign in, use Google, and use your school district account. You can save all of your whiteboards to your Lumio account. Lumio is a cloud-based software, and you can access it right in your Google Drive. I'm going to hop into Lumio here in just a moment because I want to make sure that you see where my lesson is and then how I could even share this out with my students to continue to access and work on it outside of this class period or maybe outside of our small group time. So I'm going to go ahead and like I said, I'm hopping in. I'm going to go to my browser here and I have Lumio popped up right here. All right, let me head on into, also from my Google Drive, what you're going to be able to see is up in my waffle. If I go to my waffle in my Google Drive and I scroll down, this is how I can access Lumio. just right there. So I did that kind of quickly. Let me go back here for a second. If you're wondering where are your lessons saving, if you're saving your lessons to Lumio, you can tap on your waffle, scroll down, and you're gonna see Lumio right inside of your waffle. Well, once you're on your Lumio homepage, all right, let me head back here. Okay, so once I'm in my Lumio homepage right here, all right, I can see that I have my lessons just right on my Lumio homepage. Pull that right up here. All right, it might ask you to sign in as you're getting on in there. But once you get signed in, you're going to see all of your lessons right there, and you're going to see 3 little dots, and you're going to be able to share out this lesson with your students. What's great is that you can post that share link to Google Classroom, and your students can access it later. All right, it signed me out. My apologies. We're getting all set up here. All right, there we go. So I'm thinking that if I had students working during that class time and they were working on some of those handouts or workspaces and we got all set up during that class time, I'm going to want students to keep working on that work outside of class. I'm also going to want students to be able to access all of their wonderful work outside of class. Maybe we took some notes, or maybe we really explored some vocabulary, and I want students to use that in their upcoming assignments or some upcoming projects that they're working on, and I want them to really use that vocabulary. So right here from my Lumio homepage, again, here's that whiteboard that we started. And just right together, I went into the whiteboard, I started the whiteboard, we created some of these activities for students to use either at the board or from their devices. And now what I'm going to do is tap on the 3 little dots. Now, I'm probably going to tap edit and rename this lesson. It just has date and time on it. But I know I'm going to want this to be named, exactly what my students will recognize or what I'll remember what it's called. So I might hit edit and go ahead and rename that lesson. But the next thing that I'm going to do is tap on share link. So right underneath edit, it says share link. Now, when I open this up, now I could grab a teacher share link. Maybe there's another teacher that I'm working with who would really want to use this lesson as well. I could share it with that teacher. But what I want to do is get this student access link, and I could do this. So I'm on my board right now, but really I'd probably open up my teacher device later, open up my Google Drive, go to Lumio, and then find that share link. I simply need to copy it, and then I can post it for my students. They'll click on their name to sign in, and then they can just sign right on in with their Google account and access that work that they started earlier. So if students started a handout or started a workspace, they can easily come back and keep working on it. A task like Shouted Out is one that I'm going to run live with my students while they're connected to Hello Smart. But the handouts and workspaces can certainly be accessed later outside of class. All right, Amy, let me know if there were some questions popping in there about how to share this out with students.
No questions. We're good.
All right. The other thing I'm going to point out now that I'm here in Lumio, we went right into the whiteboard and we just got started and we just went ahead and we built a quick lesson on the fly, right? We used the graphic organizers, we used the manipulatives, and we just got started right away. We were able to convert those pages. Again, I'm signed into the board. I can easily convert them and get started and have students connect. But you can pre-plan your lesson. You don't necessarily need to just start it right there on the board. You could have your lesson ready in Lumio so that when you sign into your board, right in your files, you will see that Lumio lesson. And later on this afternoon, we'll walk through how to create in Lumio. So you're welcome to come join us later on this afternoon to learn more about creating in Lumio. When I do get started here, I would just click on that green button and I can start adding activities. And again, they will be saved in my Lumio library and I can access them right from my board, right in files. All right, so we certainly want to make sure that we leave you with some more ideas and resources. So hopefully we gave you a couple of thoughts on how you could use your board, whether using some of those graphic organizers, using Shout It Out, using even just a blank page with widgets. We also, did I talk about, there's a timer right up there in your widgets. I know I use that all the time. Or I always have teachers asking me where that timer is for when we are, doing small group work or stations or some blended learning. So, like I said, I want to leave you with some resources to come back after today. This file, we'll be posting it there where all the Gold Days information is, and you're going to be able to come back to this and refer back to some steppers. But what I do want to point out here is that I am also going to be linking this document for you to review. So this doc right here, you can link out to it, or you can go to this bit.ly link right here. And this is going to give you some of those ideas that we talked about today on how you can build some centers and rotations with your smartboard. And it even talks about some additional ideas that we didn't even get into today, such as using a YouTube video. You can add a YouTube video to your board and then add that, maybe brainstorming web, and use those pages together so that your students can watch a short video and then brainstorm what they know or what they learned or reflect on all those things. So if I hop back in here and I pull this up, let me pull up this document right here. Like I said, you've got 2 pages in here, different graphic organizers that we even talked about today, some other ideas, use that spinner. Maybe students are going to build a story by spinning different parts of the story. Again, student choice. Or maybe you're even going to use your smartboard and you're going to open up that browser, and then you can use websites for your students to interact with as a station or a center. So hopefully this will give you some extra ideas on how you can use your smartboard as interactive learning. I think I saw Amy pop that link into the chat, but also the link will take you there.
I'm trying to, and I typed it wrong, and then I couldn't see it. I'm going to type it one more time the correct way. Oh, that was a slash. I missed that. Okay.
Yeah, so it's bit.ly and then smart centers, and smart is all capital. And then centers is lowercase. I know it is case sensitive.
There it goes. We got it now.
Awesome. So hopefully this gives you a couple more ideas, kind of churning around your brain on how you can use your smartboard as some small group or station rotations for your students. And Amy, looks like we just have a couple minutes left here if we have any questions.
We don't have any in the chat. If anybody has questions, feel free to come off mute and give us a chance to answer your questions. We're happy to do it.
Yeah. All right. If not, we really want to thank you all for joining us today. We hope you have a few new ideas on how you can use your smartboard with students, how you can connect those student devices. So I think that's really powerful. Don't you think, Amy? We can have students really driving that learning from their devices.
Yes, driving it from their devices, but also coming to the board and interacting with the material on the board is important as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then I love that thought of having students work and then come up to the board. We could do that virtual gallery walk, or have students, explain their thinking, teach the class, and really, show us what they know and kind of dive into these things.
Agreed.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone.